Would you like to do the thing, darling?
I don't want to do this. And no amount of persuasion can convince me.
Hello, and welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. It's the fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic, expositional podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area.
I feel like I sound more and more like a pirate and less like Winston Churchill every time I do that. I'm not even a convincing pirate either.
Some would say he was a pirate. Sir Francis Drake was a pirate.
Yeah. I've heard this actually. Yeah.
Hello, darling.
Hello.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
It's your anniversary today?
Yesterday.
Yesterday? Happy anniversary.
Thanks.
Wow, guys.
We thought we'd celebrate by expositing one of the trickier passages of Scripture.
That has caused a lot of consternation to many women.
It's kept our marriage alive for 18 years.
1 Timothy 2 has been the foundation of your marriage.
Good times.
I hope not. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, darling.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So
My pleasure.
I think it's one of the reasons that we're having you specifically on this. And
It's because I said you need to have a woman on the podcast.
yeah, let's be honest. You invited yourself.
What a foolish thing to say.
I said, don't just be two men talking about how women should be without a female voice.
And also, you just taught on this in the women's group, right?
Yes.
Literally this morning.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
As it turns out.
Oh, nice.
We are right in sync. It's really weird because we weren't even planning on doing 1 Timothy, but it was right after the last book we did.
Oh, cool.
Oh, really? It was the next book?
Yeah. We
That's
were just
funny.
like, let's just keep going. So
Cranking through.
It's funny how the Lord does that.
So for those of you who don't know, we're in 1 Timothy, and it's a book about order in the chaos, basically. And we come to this passage where Paul is telling Timothy to wage the good warfare by praying, and anything that inhibits prayer and the godly order of the community, need to do away with that. And so he talks about how the men should be, instead of lifting their hands to fight one another, they should lift their hands in prayer, which is kind of nice. And then it seems like to our modern ears, out of nowhere, we get this passage that is extremely controversial about women and their role in church. And it seems to be, and what is it exactly saying? And how do we understand the way that we should go about church life?
Well, and with the prayer
of it.
thing, right? I mean, he says, guys, don't start a fight and then pray. And then in verse 9 he says, likewise, like in the same way.
Yeah.
So he's going to talk to a different group about a different thing that he says is, what should we say, like the equivalent level of problem.
Yeah.
Something like that.
yeah.
Women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold and pearls and costly attire. Probably not an actual injunction against specific forms of clothes.
Jenna braided her hair last week.
Oh dear.
Oh, man.
Did you get angry?
Shucks. Yeah.
Did you have a bar
I
fight?
rebuked her in the name of Jesus.
Well, there you go. Then
Because
you're
that
both in trouble.
went over really well. Okay, what's he saying there?
Well, I mean, same sort of thing. If you're, I don't know, competing maybe in church, you're coming to church and it's like a kind of fashion parade, and your main focus is on just, I don't know, embarrassing other people that don't look as good as you or have as much money as you, then you're invalidating your prayer life in the same way that a bar fight would, I think, would be something.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see.
So obviously, if the women started a bar fight or the men dressed up like Anglicans, then it would be also problematic, right?
So like a lot of purple clothing and finery and fancy,
I'm seeing it.
extremely expensive cloths that you wear. like if you're adorning yourself with that kind of stuff in church in a way that could be a distraction and weird people out, then maybe that is something that someone shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my training, I was at a high church cathedral, and this lady that was teaching us said, that we wear these very expensive. She told us it was each item was £10,000 of cost, $10,000, and she said, we wear all these expensive things so that we don't draw attention to ourselves. And I foolishly said, have you thought about selling this technology to the military? And that went down very badly. But I was like, what a ludicrous idea.
But I think it's less about what the things are and what they cost, and more about the distraction that they create in an atmosphere where when you're supposed to be hearing about the good news of Jesus Christ, right? Like it's distracting to have these things take center stage in your mind.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
That's as such it is with anger and quarreling and the things that generally men have more of an issue with, and then the sort of desire to look desirable, and especially within this particular time was more of a worship of, like you had spoken about this last sermon, Ben, right, about the worship of, was it Artemis?
Yeah, Artemis, Diana.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there was an element of sexuality and sensuality within the reasoning why they were wearing these things that was distracting.
And there's some culture going on, right? So, I mean, in Victorian England, showing an ankle was thought was a really terrible thing.
Right.
I'm pretty sure if you went to John Wimber's church or something on the Californian beach, it would be, really appalling to a Victorian or
Right. Yeah, the things in and of themselves are not bad. It's just that they are a distraction to you hearing the word of God and other people hearing the gospel. So I think that's part of it.
Because you found that when you moved to England, right? The way we, as Northern English people, speak to each other is very abrasive and rude and derogatory. And it's difficult as someone who grew up in that for me to think, well, is that just that's how we show affection, or is it actually objectively horrible?
Right.
As an outsider, you just found it horrible, and maybe you were right. Maybe we were culturally blind to it, or maybe you just didn't get the context, or maybe it was a bit of both.
Right.
And you could say that with the fighting. If you watch a Greek parliament and you compare that to a Norwegian parliament, they're completely different, like things.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some
eggs.
Dead cats. The throwing of dead cats seems to have been very important in British politics in the 17th century.
Yes.
So a lot of cultural kind of stuff. But
I was just thinking that this really strikes a chord for me just as a youth pastor, that I had a word with the whole group a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, here we go. We're parents.
Just about
the group.
You
that
mean
section
my
over there.
kid?
No, I mean no. I mean like all of them.
Solomon, probably.
They're all, with the exception of Solomon.
Yeah.
That's right.
Like just about like keeping your hands to yourself.
Yes.
And and it wasn't. I don't care. It's not like we're not like a rule bait. I'm not trying to be overly legalistic, but I was like, all right, we're getting to the point where this is like distracting people from the main thing that we're trying to get at here.
Yeah.
So we just need to keep this in check a little bit.
The molestation of the youth. The molestation of the youth.
We try to avoid that. Yeah. One of my jobs is to avoid any of that kind of thing ever happening.
Well done. I'm glad to see you taking it seriously. But good point, right? You're right.
Yeah.
So whatever's going on, you've got men typically, as you say, love, doing one problem. You've got women typically doing another.
Yeah.
And although they're different groups doing different things, they're basically broadly equivalent problems.
Right.
Okay, cool. That's a helpful setup, because I think it gets us thinking about culture, gets us thinking about men and women, and our own cultural assumptions, and all of that's kind of now keying us into where he goes next.
Yeah.
All right.
You want me to read it?
I'm submitting to you.
Thanks. All right, here we go. Verse 11, let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control.
All right.
So
this has caused a lot of a stir, hasn't it? I mean, it's interesting. We've all got, the three of us, the same commentaries, basically, right? We have a go-to set of commentaries and scholars and things that we like, that we've met, we know, we've listened to before. They usually agree with each other. They usually are very helpful. They've kind of passed the sniff test, right? And we've noticed, the three of us, that they're kind of all over the map on some of these words and things. And that where normally you get a paragraph or something, they've got like a whole extra book.
Yeah. Craig Blomberg said that verse 12, I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, has been like, it's had more literature on it in recent New Testament scholarship than any other verse in the Bible.
Well, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Like
that is incredible.
I mean that word authority, right? It means in the Greek to dominate. And that, I think, to me, that puts it in a different perspective, right? Like, it's not just having authority; it's dominating men.
I think that's definitely one of the big arguments that I'd read. But you know what? Some of the other gang think there's a problem with that idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Some of them say that unfortunately this is the only example of this word in the whole of Scripture. So we've got to do what you just did, which is look at kind of extra biblical examples of it, and unfortunately it changed meaning over time. Right. So it seems that when Paul was using it, it more likely meant what you just said. That was because that's what it meant before he used it.
Right.
In a few centuries before, it actually was a word once meant to murder.
It basically went from meaning murder through something to like good authority. So it basically did a 180 as a word. Like we've got loads in our language like that, I think, of words that have basically completely changed meaning. Bad is a great example of a word that suddenly meant good.
That's sick.
Sick.
Yeah.
Sick, yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a few words, I think, that have changed meaning.
Yeah.
Skippity riz.
That's right, skippity riz.
It's not skippity, by the way. It's skibbity.
Skibbity.
Yeah.
There's
Skibbity.
no K.
And it comes from a toilet.
Oh, does it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. See? You got us off track already.
That's right.
Yeah. Well,
Let's
skibbity
get
riz,
back.
of course, in Victorian England meant, terrible.
Right.
And now
it
skibbity
means
riz means it's jolly good.
really good.
Yeah.
Anyway, probably this word's used over 1,000-year period, and maybe for the first 500 or 600 years it meant a bad thing, and for the last 400 it meant a good thing, and Paul is somewhere in the middle of that timeline, and so maybe.
Here's the thing that I just read this today that I think is really makes it kind of changed my mind on this. Okay, this is called a hendiades, or at least they think it is, which means is Greek for meaning 1 through 2. So you have two words that are put together, and oftentimes in all the other occasions in this chapter, they're basically synonyms.
Are you mansplaining?
Oh, dang it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, tell us about hendiades.
No, I can't do it. I'm putting away.
I want to know.
No, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that guy.
You have to be the hendiades guy now.
You have to.
It's really important.
I think you're not mansplaining. I think you're just explaining.
Yes.
Explaining.
Right?
Yes.
For the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was mansplaining.
No, you were not in the slightest.
No, you weren't. Not at all.
Okay, let's pause the story. I think mansplaining has become a thing that we say to kind of discount what the other person's saying.
Well, and I think it's overused, and then no one can explain anything.
Right.
I mean, if you're explaining to me how the coffee machine is made, I don't know because I don't care. And I don't even care after you've told me, but you're explaining it to me.
The machine.
It's not like I'm saying, I know how this is fixed or how to fix this. And you're going, no, so, okay, you take this little tool. It's not a wrench. it's a screwdriver. Like, that's mansplaining.
Yeah, but it would be it would be an interesting dynamic if we invited you onto this podcast, and before the podcast we both spent like 6 hours reading up on exactly that's exactly what we've done.
Yeah, but so did you, right?
Well, so did I, but also
like you kind of did too.
Yeah, no, I think
Do the Hendiasis thing. I interrupted you.
Okay.
I think it's important because so first of all, one set of scholars is saying the thing that Kat says, which is that or exercise authority. It's one word in Greek. Is a negative word. Right. And there's another group of scholars who say, no, actually, it's a positive word. And I think the hendiadys point is part of their argument. So
well, Linda Belleville says it's not hendiadys. She's an evangelical scholar. But Craig Blomberg says, okay, verse 1, petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings. Verse 2a, kings and all those in authority. Verse 2b, peaceful and quiet. 2b, godliness and holiness. Verse 3, good and acceptable. Verse 4, to be saved and to come to a knowledge of the truth. Notice these are all synonyms. Verse 7, I was appointed a preacher and an apostle. Verse 7b, I'm telling the truth, I am not lying. Verse 8, without anger or disputing. Verse 9, decency and propriety. Verse 11, quietness and full submission. And then you get verse 12.
And so all of those are examples of parallel pairs of almost synonymous words. They're not opposite words, they're synonymous words, kind of amplifying each other and working together as a pair.
I guess. I mean, that's an argument.
Okay.
It doesn't mean he couldn't break that pattern, I guess, and do something different.
So if you're right about that, then teach or exercise authority would be either both negative or both positive things. Is that the point?
Teach is never negative.
Right.
Is it?
Well, no. In the chapter 1, he says heterodidaskalo, which is like opposite teaching or false teaching. But like without the hetero bit, then it's just didaskalo, which means teach. So yeah, it's a kind of...
Okay.
All right. So that's the alternative argument. So it either is saying, I don't let women bully the men,
mm-hmm.
or is saying, I don't let women lead men in a good way, which is...
What? I don't understand why that's...
Why what? Why it works? Why it goes together, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it just goes together because it's sort of the same thing.
Well, in which case, then exercise authority can't be bad because teaching's good.
Well, but I think... yeah.
And that's the challenge.
Teaching can be good, but if you teach in a dominating way, that is going to be bad no matter what you do.
You're saying the teaching is taking its negative connotation from the negative authority word.
Potentially.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't really...
That's a good point.
Dissected
I haven't heard that one yet. That's a good one.
But...
Well, actually, yeah, that can make some sense, though, because the overall context, right, is he's correcting women, I guess, not learning quietly and in submissiveness. Mm. So they've stepped outside of the role of the student, which I think this is actually a really dignifying verse. Let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. Mm-hmm. All students should be learning quietly with all submissiveness.
Yeah.
And the women hadn't had any opportunities or many to learn. Perhaps this is the argument, right? So if the women have not had much of a chance to learn Christianity, mm-hmm. they might have learned lots of Artemis stuff, but if they haven't had much of a chance to learn Christianity, then this would actually be quite an enabling verse, wouldn't it? That would say, we need to let the women learn.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the same way that it says, I mean, if they are not familiar with Christianity, they shouldn't be teaching anytime soon. Mm-hmm. In the same way that, don't let a new convert be an elder at your church or a deacon or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's a practicality that comes with that instruction.
Yeah.
And maybe there's not only just in the fact that they didn't actually know as much at the time, but also because, I mean, men don't like to be taught by women. They just don't. Oof. And I think that there's a part of us, a part of how God has made us that that is the reasoning behind that, and that makes sense. Like, men are protectors, they are providers, they need to feel like they are the biggest in the room. And I think it's hard for men to be taught by women because they want to protect that woman.
One funny example of this, I'm not sure I entirely agree, by the way.
Yeah.
But because I think men need to be taught by women.
I do too, but I just think not in a, go ahead.
Sure. But like when we were in seminary, Jenna gave a sermon in chapel, and we had this one, our one like faculty advisor, who you know, but I won't mention who it was. And he said afterward, he gave her one piece of feedback, and he said like, well, two pieces of feedback. One was that he thought that the way that she walked down into the chapel, Jenna walks on her toes sometimes, or at least she used to.
Oh yeah, because of the dance.
Yeah, I think. We don't really know entirely.
Yeah.
Because my kids all do it too, which is really weird.
I've seen that.
Okay. And what was the beef about her?
So like, he just thought that was strange. And then he said, your voice, you speak in kind of a high voice.
Like a woman.
And it's grating on the, quote, grating on the male ear.
Oh!
Oh boy.
She was just like, we just kind of looked at him with open mouth.
Yeah.
I think that, I think at 1 Corinthians 11, Paul is actually assuming that women are both prophesying, or doing the role of prophesying, which had a teaching component.
Because he explains in chapter 14 of 1 Corinthians what prophesying is, right? So, and he does say that it's a teaching thing.
So, I mean, personally, like scripturally and pastorally, I think like the times like you and Jenna have both preached. I think that the most popular podcast ever,
most popular sermon ever was Grumpy About Grace in the Jonah series that Kat preached. Yeah. So we've kind of shown our hand a little bit by being ordained ministers in the church who have women in the pulpit. We've kind of shown our hand a bit. But I do think we need to make a distinction between kind of church teaching and secular teaching. Yeah. I mean, I met most of my best teachers in the secular world have been women. Probably the most frightening was our law school professor, Delia Coonan, who was known as Coonan the Barbarian. She was such a violent teacher. Coonan the Barbarian. So, there was definitely, many of my best teachers have been women. So,
yeah, and I think also that you have to discuss then the sort of level of what you're talking about in terms of the hierarchy.
Yes.
So
there's teaching in the secular world, teaching in the church, and there's different types of teaching in the church.
Right, because clearly I'm okay with women preaching, speaking from the pulpit, because I've done that, and so Jenna, but.
Which, by the way, listeners, we haven't seen Kat Shuttleworth in the pulpit in a little while, so you can send your requests into Alex at christchurchfoxchapel.org.
She's got the girl version of that address.
Yeah, or Kat email address at christchurchfoxchapel.org.
So it could be right that if this parallel pair of ideas go together, notwithstanding whether that forces exercise authority to mean something positive or negative, parking that point, that it is, if you like, narrowing the parameters of what this type of teaching is. So you've got teaching generally, right, and you've got authoritative teaching as a distinct subcategory of teaching. So one possibility would be that Paul is saying, I want women to learn so that they can teach in the church as they do everywhere else.
Right.
But there's one narrow type of teaching that I want them to refrain from doing. That's a possibility.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I see
it. Is it?
Yeah.
That's what you've come to the... And so as you tested that thesis out in the women's group, did anyone, what was the...
No, they were really okay with it.
Interesting.
Didn't have any trouble with it.
Interesting. So I wonder if some of our anxiety about how this plays is just misfounded.
But I mean, I think we did talk about the fact that we are all gifted for different things, right? And there are certain giftings we get just as children of God, but within that, I think there's certain giftings that we get as male or female, right? And
typically, you mean?
Typically, yeah. Right? In terms of a mom and dad, for instance, a dad, it can be the best dad, but they do not provide the same thing that the mom does. They just won't do it. Like there's, plenty of times you've said to me, like, I just wouldn't bother. But so many of their needs would not be met because he either doesn't see it or he sees it and he's like, I wouldn't do that. And
that
so,
happens all the time this morning.
And even though it's a lot to do, I take it on because I think it's valuable and I see fruit from it and they love it.
There is fruit from it. I'm not suggesting you're getting it wrong.
No, I'm not saying you are.
There's a huge amount of fruit from it.
Yep.
But this is absolutely true. There's a disposition in me, to say, good night, chaps, and then leave them alone.
Yeah.
And there's an instinct in you to check on them.
To make sure that they're emotionally okay and check in on them. And
same in the morning.
Yeah.
It's definitely the case in my house that whenever I put the kids to bed and Jen is out of the house, they always go like, or if I'm watching them, they're always like, probably usually pretty well behaved with me. And there's not any emotional meltdowns. And I'm like, I did so great. And then Jenna walks in the door and it's like
everything.
The tears just
They bottled it up until she came home.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same when I go away. Like I go away and he's like, it's been great. Aside from, of course, the church always like goes into chaos.
Okay. Robert has a heart attack or something.
Yeah. But the kids just like melt down when I get home because they've been storing it up.
We have this video of you. We were just on the headland, the beach in Cornwall, Polzeth Beach, and Kat's gone to the bathroom and I've got the kids. We're just getting settled in the car. And in the video, which I took instead of parenting, Ben and Hannah are just sitting there.
Wailing.
Uncontrollable floods of tears. You've been away for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And you come walking up the hill and you put your arms out and you go, oh, what's happened? And there's and all I could think to do was just to film this.
Yeah. It's just like letting them sit there like
they were absolutely out of control.
So I've been gone for 2 minutes. I think it's just, and my point is, right, we have these different giftings and as much as I would want to be able to sing like Kirsten, I can't. And it would do me no good if all I did was wish that I could instead of exercising the gifts that I do have. And so I feel like we have a gift, right? We can do certain things that you can't, and you can do certain things that we can't.
I think that, I think that like, just as it's at least any reasonable discussion is going to say, men cannot be mothers and women cannot be fathers.
Right.
Actually, Paul kind of goes there. I mean, there's a lot of, so there's Adam and Eve language, there's childbearing language, there's mother-father language. There's a lot of stuff that seems resonant of all of those images going on right here. So, a great thing would be to say, if Paul says men having a punch up in a bar before church is invalidating your prayer life, and women letting things hang out and wearing too much jewelry is invalidating your prayer life, right? These are different people with different problems that he says are broadly equivalent things. You should expect, I guess, here, if women are being asked not to do this narrow form of teaching,
right,
you should expect similarly something that men are not allowed to do or can't do. And we find exactly that in verse 15, which is the childbearing point. So men can't make babies.
Yeah.
Now, it might be worth pausing the story again, and this is one of those kind of cultural moments where we think of being a childbearer as a kind of second-class role.
Right.
Right? I mean, how many people have you heard say, I'm just a mum?
So many.
Yeah.
And what do they mean by that? Why are they saying that?
Or they'll say, do you work?
Yeah.
Do you work?
Oh, on like doctor forms and medical forms, it says like occupation. I always put mom now. It's because, I think society makes
What's your day off,
feel
love,
like,
as a mother?
yeah,
What's your
none,
day?
no, none days off. But society makes it feel like it's a sort of standard role.
This is one of the things I think I've been thinking about a lot, is that when you take this text and Paul's paradigm and you try to squeeze it into a 21st century secular set of assumptions, he's going to sound like a bigot.
Yeah.
The woman's saved, through childbearing. So you're saying that all the women need to be, we're just good for baby factories.
Yeah.
Thanks.
While the men make the decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the men keep the place of power.
Yeah. We be quiet with our bare feet and our babies padding around, and you guys go and do all the big good stuff that's valuable. And that's just not what he's saying. And
well, I mean, scripture's been used like this before. I mean, slaveholders use scripture to justify their slaveholding, even though it says, basically you shouldn't do that.
And I think that's part of the reason we have such a reaction to it as a society, because it has been used to abuse and subserviate women, right? That there were people within the women's group today who had been raised in that kind of environment, where instead of having a balanced view of each person has their roles and their responsibilities and actually digging into it, they just used it as a club to make sure that the women just were quiet and shut up.
Because they felt threatened, probably.
Probably, yeah. Or because they just didn't bother to do the work of actual looking into it.
So if we park the cultural baggage as much as we can, right, and that's like me as a northerner parking kind of sarcastic remarks, like it's hard to do. But if we do, right, then what we have is something like this. I want women to learn so that they can participate in the full life of the church. And I want women even to teach in the church. But there's this narrow type of teaching that I'm asking them to refrain from doing. And we might maybe try and explore what that could be. And in the same way, likewise, the men are not able to bear children. So you've got men essentially doing everything except for one thing. You've got women essentially doing everything except for one thing. And there must be some reason why Paul is so keen that we each do 99% of this thing, but not the whole. There must be some reason why I mean, men, if you like, have a biological reminder on a daily basis that they're not God. And that is the fact that they can't bring life into this world. Women without that impediment are, I guess, submitting in a different way, but it amounts to the same thing.
Can I pause the whole before we come up with? So I think there's a lot of reasons why I think we can say that this makes sense, but before it doesn't make. When you first read through it and you say, "Oh, okay," just as men can't bear children, this is saying that the authoritative teaching in the church, whatever that means, on some level, is to be a man. Even if there's a part of me that revolts against that, I think I need to say, if that is the clear teaching of the text, I have my set of cultural assumptions that I bring to that, and I need to check those. I need to check myself before I wreck myself a little bit. Like, I don't. I guess like the obeying doesn't always mean understanding. I feel like I'm really quick to try to come up with explanations as to why I think it makes sense or why I think it's wise, and that's right and good. But before we go there, I think we just need to kind of pause our experiences and our lenses and ask, if this does this really mean this? And when we look at it as objectively as possible, what was he actually saying? And okay, like that's the word of God. Like
I mean, Tammy put it really well. We were talking about this. Needless to say, I've talked about this with the whole staff team, because I want to know what they think, right? So, from what I can tell, the whole staff team is in the same sort of bracket. Like, no one's miles away from anyone else in terms of what they think this means. And Tammy made a really, really cool point. She said, look, in the Old Testament, it said that people are not to eat pork. And we don't really know why. Like, there's lots of ideas about why. But it seems what's more important is the fact that they don't do it. There's something about that submission to this rule and relying on God that's of more benefit than anything else. Like, a refraining from things is beneficial. And you might say the same about fasting or something like that. These little reminders that you're not in charge are actually quite helpful for anyone. This reminder that you're not omnicompetent, perfect, that God's gift to the world, the only thing that counts, is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And so boundaries and restrictions and things actually can be quite liberating, was her point. I thought it was a brilliant point. Because I wasn't, in my mind, connecting authoritative teaching in childbirth to pork rules. in Leviticus. But I mean, that's the benefit of talking about this sort of stuff with each other.
What do we do when we come across something that doesn't make any sense?
I mean, I think there are a lot of really good logical, sensible reasons why it makes sense. None of which I would get into on a podcast, but I would in a conversation with somebody. But but I also want to say that, like, doesn't mean women can't feed into every aspect of running the church in the authoritative. I mean, look at Alec and Tamara. You don't think she informs nearly everything that he does? And I think that teaches humility. It teaches submission.
Yeah.
And it just, we have to take it on the chin and say, oh, I don't get credit for that. But it doesn't matter, because people's lives are being changed by the gospel.
I mean, that's a brilliantly humble way of putting it. Yeah. It's interesting that I think all of the ministers in our church are effectively in a pair. Josh and Kirsten, Robert, Tammy, Ben, Jenna, me, and you. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You're also right that, as Ben alluded to this prophesying in 1 Corinthians, it doesn't say women may never teach in the church,
right,
or may never influence a church,
right,
or may never lead in a church. It doesn't say any of those things. In fact, the fact that he's gone through such arcane and sort of language to say whatever it is he's saying, I think leaves open a lot.
Totally. And I think you have to take the whole counsel of Scripture, especially all writings of Paul, right, where he edifies and encourages women leaders, right?
Yep.
And talks about their role in the church. So he's not anti-woman. He's actually counterculturally pro-woman.
Yeah, that's also really significant. A third of the people he speaks to at the beginning of his letters as the kind of fellow workers, they're all women.
Always women included.
We were looking at our church, we've had 6 wardens in the time that we've worked here, and 5 of them have been women. It's not that I'm against male leadership in principle, it's just I've not found a man who can do the job.
That's like the Salvation Army thing.
Yeah. Well, I think whenever you have a scenario where it's all men running the show or all women running the show, the cultures always end up becoming really warped. So, I hold the convictions I have about all this pretty lightly. And the thing that I've come to realize that is really, really abundantly clear, like the path to healthy church, to healthy obedience of the biblical teaching is actually very exceedingly clear through all these texts. It's that women and men were created to be co-rulers over the creation, and they have to rule together. So the key word is interdependence.
Right.
That we need one another, and marriage is a great picture of that. But I think it even extends beyond that to like brothers and sisters in the church.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like the complementarity of the sexes enriches, and without that there is not a proper imaging of God.
Yes. Because Adam has this experience before Eve of being in an unfallen world that's not good. Because he's alone.
Yeah.
And there's something lacking. And then he sees Eve and he says, at last.
Yeah.
So you've got this idea that there's a more full image of God, because male and female he created them, in his image he created them, right? So you've got the full image of God is shown through men and women. So if you want a church, I guess, to be more revelatory of the nature of God, having men and women in prominent places is actually the way to go. And yet there is what looks here to be some sort of symbolic, narrow, specific restriction on what women are invited to do. You might even go to say he's telling women to back off here, as opposed to saying it's not possible or you may never.
Right.
But it's best for you to back down here. In the same way, men have already learned this. They can't be mothers.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's in our culture, there is some people read this and their reaction is, okay, well, this makes me mad, and so we're gonna specifically try to have promote women to teach and dominate the men in the church,
right.
Yeah.
and just to stick it to Paul and their patriarchal thing. And the ironic thing is that like they're creating the very problems that Paul is warning about here.
I mean, a really interesting example would be someone like Beth Moore, who, as I understand it, holds to something like the view we've been coming up with too.
Mm-hmm. So
she's an extremely influential teacher, right? She has a ministry that reaches, would you say millions?
Millions.
Yeah. So in any church that she's involved in, she's the big noise. She's one of the best known teachers in the Christian world.
Right.
She would not
she wouldn't pastor
a church because she's equating in her mind pastor with the authoritative teaching point. Right. I'm not sure I would actually. I think I'm not. I don't equate pastor with authoritative teacher, but she has.
But within that kind of bracket.
Within that bracket, so she's a bit more strict than me.
She's to the right of you, yeah.
But what's funny is that her ministry has been ludicrously blessed.
Yeah, and she's teaching like so many men and women.
Right.
I mean, she does have women's ministry, but she welcomes anyone in. So,
and I've listened to lots of her things. They're great. So there's a great example of someone who holds a view that you might even say is slightly stricter than mine.
Right.
Having a thriving
Massive
international teaching ministry.
Yeah.
In her own right. So she's not just influencing her husband behind the scenes.
Right.
She's in front of the scenes. I think it's just a great example of how this doesn't have to be about the subjugation of women to a kind of background role.
And I think it's so the enemy to take it and just have a heyday with that division that you can create with this one sentence.
Well, and also to the extent that men seek after being center stage and receiving glory, their ministry will be fruitless and cursed. So, this is the whole principle of the kingdom, is that the first will be last and the last are first. So
submission is actually a key to having a fruitful ministry.
Absolutely.
And maybe women like Beth Moore have been so blessed because there was this thing and that their conscience held them to, and they submitted to it, and that puts you in a posture where you can actually hear what God is saying, rather than self-promotion and All
right. So one more question for us. Isn't this just a fancy way of saying there's a glass ceiling and women can do everything except the top job, and they can do all of the secondary things, they just can't be the top boss? And if it means that, isn't that just bad? And do we have an answer for that?
We're just an old boys club.
I think it's worth asking that. Is that what this is saying?
Do you think, is your read, that do women feel like that in the church? Like I feel like you're the only person who can really properly answer that question.
I mean, I think that there are certainly women probably in the church. There weren't anyone there this morning that had that sort of sense from it, because I think that we just talked about embracing the jobs and the giftings that we are given that are actually greater than being the top boss just above the glass ceiling, right? We talked about the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Like how many women have influenced and been the reason that so many of the top echelon of men ministers have gone on to do the great things they've done for the gospel. And they didn't want to do that. They don't want that. They just want to, I think there are some women that do, perhaps, but
I think you've cracked it. I think the idea that the the authoritative teacher, doctrine setter, or whatever that person is. The idea that is the top job, the only one that's important, or whatever we would say, that I think is a cultural idea.
It's a misunderstanding of what the top job is.
Yes, I think that's a cultural idea.
Yeah.
I mean, the top job, if you really want to say what the top job is the sovereign, eternal King of the universe dying in his underpants on a cross. That's the top job. Mm-hmm. So, like, our Christian understanding of what top job is upside down compared to the world. But in any event, I think the Bible talks about all sorts. I mean, Paul says first I appointed apostles and then prophets and then teachers, right? And he calls these the higher gifts. It looks to me as though the gifting of apostleship and teaching and prophesying seem to be more, I don't know if important's the right word, but sort of more prominent.
More valuable.
This.
Jesus said the top job is taking off your coat and washing feet and then going to the cross. So, and he's submitting to the will of the Father. So he's submitting himself. So what
you say is the only thing women can't do is the worst job in the church.
Well,
which is being that
in our polity, the way that our church is set up, right, the only way, kind of, you have to, like, where do you draw the boundary line? Maybe is the practical question. The way that the Anglican Church has that set up is the bishop,
right?
Episcopos. We don't have female bishops,
right?
We do have female rectors,
right?
Female presbyters. We could have a female. A woman can be in my job within our polity, and the way that we as a diocese have applied and understand this verse. So
individuals disagree. There's a wide variety of views in our diocese,
right?
For a wide variety of reasons, and I want to respect as many of those as possible.
Yeah.
Though one or two I think are silly, I want to actually respect
definitely
almost all of those panoply of views, because a lot of people are wrestling with it like we are.
Yeah. But the rule is that, which neither of us can control. And would I want to be a bishop? I would rather have all of my fingernails ripped out of their sockets with pliers and then have my eyes gouged out.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most separate job from actually being among the sheep, I think, that you can have.
It's awful.
It's terrible.
I just want to go on record say that I would rather have my eyes gouged out with spoons.
Yeah. So would we.
It's funny because when Paul talks about overseers in the next bit, and let's say those overseers we've come up with bishops. Bishops are great. It's a great idea. There are lots of different ways of governing a church. This is the way we govern a church. So let's, for the sake of argument, say that overseers are Anglican bishops, and that's a ludicrous comment, but let's say that they are. Because they are to us. Then Paul says, if anyone aspires to the office of an overseer, he desires a noble task. I think he's trying to big it up because it sounds like an absolutely terrible job.
It's an absolutely terrible job.
This is a great position. All can apply.
I'm super grateful for our bishop. I would never want his job.
Never.
And now, but you would say, in an ultimate sense, Bishop Alec has the most influential role, right? Because when I'm in an A or B situation, I call him up and he says, you need to do this.
Right.
And when I'm really unsure what to do, he says, well, I recommend you do that. And if I get something wrong and he catches me, he says, now you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. So there's a significant role of shepherding, overseeing, teaching, boundarying, helping me, which is really significant. But most people in our church have never spoken to the bloke.
No.
Most people in our church have never had him turn up at their bedside when they're in a hospital. He's a very, very prayerful man, but he can't possibly have prayed for most of our church by name.
No.
He's
and you get maybe a couple of hours a month or a couple of months. Like, it's not like,
if I ask for it.
If you ask for it, it's not like he gets to build these connections and be part of a community of faith. Like,
I would say in the lives of our body, you, Kat, have more influence over the souls of our church than our bishop does.
Oh yeah, totally.
And they would feel that way.
Mm-hmm. Should do, or there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing. I think we're looking at the seniority and maybe some of the trappings of the office and saying, oh, well, this isn't fair. The women are being kept from being the kind of king. And that doesn't look like a very biblical way of understanding it. And actually, when you think about it practically, that doesn't seem like it really actually matches our real experience either.
No.
Well, the Bible would call into question the entire idea that you're trying to climb some kind of staircase. I think generally climbing staircases in order to get to the heavens is looked down upon in the Bible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The Tower of Babel, like the low place is the place from which we're exalted. The only person who really accepted was exaltation is Jesus, and he was raised up on a cross.
Yeah, that's the kind of exaltation he got.
So, I mean, if you're not willing to deal with limitations and accept that, and Christianity is going to be really hard for you.
All right, let me test out a summary sentence. Women, I want you to learn so that you can participate in the full life of the church, like all the women do in all these other churches we've been talking about. I want you to do all sorts of things, including teaching and leading and being in prominent places. But there's one symbolic way in which I want you to back down out of choice. Adam, man, doesn't really get a choice. It's pretty clear to him he can't bear children.
Right.
And so women, we want you to kind of lower yourself to the same position of him. Right. It's a different idea, but it's an equivalent concept. And by the way, this very important role of authoritative teaching, it is important. It's not the only important thing in the church. It may, in practical terms, not even be the most connectedly influential thing either.
Right.
But when you each kind of hold back from being omnicompetent everything people, you'll actually be better off, because you'll need to rely on each other more. And if you rely on each other more, you'll see your need for God. And if you want to look at what being in charge really looks like, look at Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a really long sentence. It's more like sort of a thought bubble, but whatever. I mean, you know, shorten this sort of run on. Hannah would have a problem with that.
You got a few days still. It's only Tuesday.
Yeah, whittle it down.
Boys aren't quite as good as girls, so girls need to back off so men don't feel quite so bad.
Well, I don't think he's addressing a male inferiority as the reason, or I don't think he's addressing like.
Oh, see, this way you can't oversimplify.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess I can do the gospel in 10 words, but I'm not sure I can do this.
No.
I pity the fool who has to preach on this.
It's not me.
Not me.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
You'll do great. It'll be great. It'll be fine.
Fine.
Good. Well, this has been a podcast of Christchurch Fox Chapel. I'm really, really grateful that you'd be here. I'm going to try and record another one where Ben teaches everything.
I'm just going to mansplain this
about women in Scripture. You don't have to sit through that one.
Good.
Oh, goodness.
Thanks for joining us. Please address all complaints to Kat Shuttleworth
at Amazon.com.
And thanks for stopping by.
Stay classy.
San Diego.